Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Online with the CMC. I am your facilitator, Mary Cornell, and our topic today is Dublin Down with Dublin Core, presented by Dr. Pamela Thomas. On to you, Pam.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry. So yes, I'm Dr. Pamela Thomas, and we're going to talk about Dublin Core. Before we get started, I just want to acknowledge that some of this content was added by our former metadata cataloger, Erin Rose, and this presentation would not have been the same without her contributions. I can talk pretty sometimes, people. She and I had actually started this presentation like over a year ago, and then I picked it back up. So that being said, I will take your questions at the end of the presentation, but feel free to type your questions in the chat box at any time, and Mary is going to monitor that. The presentation slides are on L2 right now, just the slides. And then after the presentation, the slides with the notes will be added to L2. So if you want to hop onto L2 and grab the slides, feel free. Okay, sorry. Okay, so we're going to do basics of Dublin Core in practice, some examples of various formats. So sorry. Ugh, gross. Okay, Illinois Digital Archives, CMC examples, the Dublin Core generator. So, oh my gosh, so sorry. Sorry, that was right in your ears. Horrible. Okay, so let's talk about the Dublin Core basics. So what is Dublin Core? It's a small set of vocabulary terms that can be used to describe digital resources such as video, images, web pages, etc., as well as physical resources such as books or CDs and objects like artworks. And then Dublin Core metadata is metadata designed for interoperability on the basis of semantic web or linked data principles. So while Dublin Core actually targets electronic resources, it aims to be flexible enough to help in searches for more traditional formats of data as well, such as websites, which are the most common users of Dublin Core. And much like BibFrame, Dublin Core is another way to describe your items. My only experience using Dublin Core has been for digitized items and collections which have been uploaded to the Illinois Digital Archives or the IDA website, using Content DM to create the Dublin Core templates and data. Dublin Core can be used by anyone, but is mainly used by libraries, universities, and document-heavy fields such as law. If you had to catalog a photo or an image using Mark 21, what would that look like? Very brief, right? So a Dublin Core record for a photo might still be fairly brief, but the Dublin Core elements allow for a richer description than Mark 21 allows for. Later on in the presentation, I will show you a Dublin Core record for a photo, which will more clearly highlight the usefulness of Dublin Core versus Mark 21 for certain items. So where did Dublin Core come from? So it was developed jointly by OCLC and NCSA, which is the National Center for Supercomputing Applications. And that was in Dublin, Ohio at the 1995 Invitational OCLC NCSA Metadata Workshop. Dublin Core describes materials, and it's straightforward, clean, and simple to use. So at this OCLC NCSA Metadata Workshop, more than 50 people discussed how a core set of semantics for web-based resources would be extremely useful for categorizing the web for easier search and retrieval. They dubbed the result Dublin Core metadata based on the location of the workshop, which was in Dublin, Ohio. And it was originally developed to describe web resources, but Dublin Core has been used to describe a variety of physical and digital resources. And it can describe materials such as a digital copy of a physical book, an MP3 of a song off an original album, or even a physical item. While Dublin Core is touted as easy, I want to note that it's easy once you have a handle on what the different elements apply to. And there are always rules to adhere to, but compared to standards such as Mark 21, it is much more straightforward. So the Dublin Core Metadata Initiative, or DCMI, supports innovation in metadata design and best practices. And DCMI does the following. So they work on architecture and modeling, discussions and collaborative work in communities and task groups. They hold global conferences, meetings, and workshops, and they provide educational efforts to promote the widespread acceptance of metadata standards and best practices. And DCMI is supported by a paid membership model. Now, the Dublin Core Metadata Initiative separated from OCLC and has created community groups, best practices, and again, holds conferences, meetings, and workshops. While OCLC owns Content DM, which is a digital collection management system, and allows you to easily build, preserve, and showcase your digital collections on your personalized website, making them more discoverable to people around the world. Content DM also secures and monitors your digital originals in a cloud-based preservation archive so they remain safe for the future. And that's from the OCLC website. Okay. So there are variations of Dublin Core. There are the simple Dublin Core, which is 15 core elements. And then there are the qualified Dublin Core, which adds 3 additional elements. So the 15 core elements are contributor, coverage, creator, date, description, format, identifier, language, publisher, relation, rights, source, subject, title, and type. And then the 3 additional elements, which would make it a qualified Dublin Core, are audience, provenance, and rights holder. Okay, so we're going to go through the 15 simple Dublin Core elements in the order that they're listed, which happens to be alphabetical. But if you're using Content DM or some other digital collection management system, I would think that you can place these in whatever order you feel makes the most sense. So the first 3 are contributor, coverage, and creator. The contributor is the entity responsible for making contributions to a resource. Notice they've incorporated some of that lovely RDA language. Thanks, guys. And then coverage is next. So that's spatial or temporal topic of the resource, spatial applicability of resource, jurisdiction under which the resource is relevant, and then creator, which is the entity primarily responsible for making the resource. I love the RDA terminology. So sarcastic right now, so sorry. Okay, so the next 3 elements are date, description, and format. And just be aware that the date actually has a set format. So it's year, year, year. So it's 4-digit year, and then month, month, 2-digit month, and then day, day, 2-digit day. And so the date is a point or period in time associated with the event and life cycle of a resource. The description is a free text field, and that's the account of the resource. In other words, a table of contents, graphical representation, or free text account of resource. And then for the format is a physical medium or the dimensions. So that's file format, physical medium, dimension, size, or duration. And sometimes it's fun just trying to get used to these different elements and what they really mean. Okay, sorry, our next 3 elements are identifier, language, and publisher. If the creator and publisher are the same, do not repeat the name in the publisher area. If the nature of the responsibility is ambiguous, the recommended practice is to use publisher for organizations and creator for individuals. And then in cases of lesser or ambiguous responsibility other than creation, use contributor. So identifier is the unambiguous reference to a resource within a given context. The ID resource by means of a string conforming to a formal ID system. Language is the language of the resource. Publisher is an entity responsible for making resource available, and a person, organization, or service. And we will go over examples so you can kind of see these in action instead of just listening to words describing what they are. Okay, our next 3 elements are relation, rights, and source. While the elements relation and rights are fairly self-explanatory, source is a little murky. Source is the information about a second resource from which the present resource is derived. So try to think of like primary and secondary resources when you're doing research. That's where source comes in. So what is a relation? It's a related resource. It's an ID related resource by means of a string conforming to a formal ID system, in other words, an identifier. An ID resource by means of a string conforming to a formal ID system. The rights is rights held in and over a resource. typically includes a statement about property rights associated with the resource, including intellectual property rights. And then the source is the related resource from which the resource is derived, which really is not very clear. And then it's derived from related resource in whole or in part by means of a string conforming to a formal ID system or identifier. Again, we'll go over some examples of this. Okay, so the final three elements are subject, title, and type. So the subject is the topic of the resource, represented using keywords, key phrases, classification codes. The title is a name given to a resource, and then the type is the nature or genre of the resource. And it also is like a note, and it describes the file format, physical medium, or dimensions of the resource, and you using the format element to describe that. Okay, let's look at some examples of items in Dublin Core format. So this is an item, artwork, young woman in white dress with fan. Yes, that's the title of the artwork. And this item is owned by the Library of Congress, and it can be found in their digital collections. This one has 13 DC elements. So it's got title, creator, date created, published, medium, reproduction number, rights advisory, access advisory, call number, repository, notes, subject format, and collections. So this is actually a digitized copy of the print, but the print itself is actually available to view at the Library of Congress. I don't know if you can actually touch it, but I know you can go and look at it. I don't think it can be removed from the Library of Congress, sadly, but you can actually view it with your eyes. But just remember that each institution can decide which Dublin Core elements they want to use. Sometimes the nature of the item or the collection often affects what elements are suitable. I just thought this was a really cool image, and I really like the historical documents just because I feel like, you know, like if the Library of Congress or whoever owns these items, if they weren't digitizing them and making them available, there's no way I would have ever seen this piece of artwork, because I don't go anywhere, but I can look at things on my computer, right? But just notice, so this one has call number, which is kind of a different element. I don't know what CAI Gillespie number 4 B size PMP means, but I'm sure the Library of Congress knows what that means. But the digital quality of their items is pretty cool. We'll look at some more later. Not this one though, because this is not owned by the Library of Congress. So this is just an example of a DVD Blu-ray. Because it's a DVD, there's no creator. Also because the publisher and creator are the same entity. And because this item was created by an organization, publisher was added rather than creator. On the left are the Dublin Core elements. You can look at those. Hopefully they're big enough for you to see. And on the right are the elements after using the Dublin Core generator. And we'll talk more about the Dublin Core generator at the end of the presentation. And as I mentioned on slide 10, and I'll repeat again, if the creator and publisher are the same, do not repeat the name in the publisher area. If the nature of the responsibility is ambiguous, the recommended practice is to use publisher for organizations and creator for individuals. In cases of lesser or ambiguous responsibility other than creation, use contributor. So this is just the record for Captain Marvel, and you can just see this one actually has subjects in the title, and it's got a pretty rich description. And of course, the publisher is Marvel Studios. And for the contributors, you've got the film producer, director, screenwriter, etc. But you can see the difference of how it looks, not using the Dublin Core generator versus what it looks like on the right with the Dublin Core generator with the elements labeled. Okay. So this is an example of a book. This is Egypt and Nubia, Volume 1, which is the first of a 3-volume set of illustrations by David Roberts of his visit to the Holy Land between 1846 and 1849. The image on the right is one of his color illustrations and is part of the Royal Collection Trust. So William Brockton actually wrote the historical descriptions, so he's designated as a creator while Roberts is named as a contributor. which I think is a little unfair, but you know, that's the way it is, right? So the Dublin Core elements were entered into the Dublin Core generator, which again, I'll talk about later in this presentation. I mean, this is a fairly brief record. There's just not a lot of information for this, but I think using Dublin Core probably gives you a little more information than you would if you were using a MARC record. At least that's my opinion. I just thought this was a really cool drawing, so that's why I chose it. Okay, so this is a photograph of Sgt BF Smith. This is an ambrotype tintype photograph. It's again part of the Library of Congress collection. This record has 14 Dublin Core elements. So title, date created / published, medium, summary, reproduction number, rights advisory, access advisory, call number, repository, notes, subjects, format, collections, and part of. And remember, not all DC elements are necessary for describing each item. Again, I just thought this was a really cool picture. And the record itself, especially in the notes, gives you a lot of information. And of course, if you did this in MARC 21 format, you would add all of those notes to the record as well. But you would basically have to put a lot of that information, like the summary and rights advisory and access advisory in notes too. So it might look a little odd if it was a MARC 21 record, because there'd be a lot of 5xx's for this. Okay, I thought this map was so cool. So this is an example of a map. Why I thought it was so cool is because it's from 1624 and like, look how clear it is. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm just a nerd. Anyway, so this is map of northern coast of South America showing mouths of Amazon and Orinoco rivers. Sorry if I like totally screwed up the pronunciation of that. Illustrated with dwellings, boats, animals, and Indians killing boa. Like, who had fun creating that title, right? So this is an engraving. And this again is owned by the Library of Congress, and the digitized image is shown above left, and the description can be found in the Library of Congress digital collection. Notice that there are only 9 Dublin Core elements for this map. So there's title, date created / published, medium, reproduction number, rights advisory, call number, repository, notes, and collections. So there really must not have been too much information about it, but I think that the information provided describes it, adequately. I don't know, maybe I'm the only one that thinks this is a cool map. We can talk about that later. Okay, so this is an example of ephemera. So this is Cap Anson, Chicago White Stockings baseball card portrait. I included this because my dad has been a lifelong Chicago White Sox fan, and I found this picture. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna add this to my presentation. So this is actually a baseball card. And you can see that the digitized image is above right, and that's Cap Anson there with his uniform. And this is a chromolithograph. And again, owned by the Library of Congress. It's part of their digital collection. And the Library of Congress owns the original baseball card as well as, this digitized image. This has 15 Dublin Core elements for the ephemera. So we've got title, other title, related names, date created / published, medium, reproduction number, rights advisory, access advisory, call number, repository, notes, subjects, format, collections, and part of. So this is actually part of the baseball cards from the Benjamin K. Edwards collection. And so the title is the Cap Anson Chicago White Stockings baseball card portrait, but the other title is card set Goodwin Champions, and then N162 in parentheses. And then notice in the related names, you've got Goodwin and Company as a sponsor. But this was created and published in 1888, and I think the quality of the image is pretty good for it being that old. Okay, now we're gonna look at some slides that are examples of documents that the CMC is actually cataloged, and they can all be found on the Illinois Digital Archives website. Okay, so this is the homecoming pamphlet from October 23rd, 1881, where Bradley University played against Lombard College. And this is part of the Meadville-Lombard Theological School collection. Lombard College used to be located in Galesburg, Illinois. And you can, again, find this digitized document on the IDA website. I thought the image quality was actually very good for being from 1881. And I don't know why I like this picture so much. Just like the stances of the guys, and they just look, the one guy looks like he's just ready to start running, and the other guy looks like very intimidating. But I just thought this was a pretty cool image to share. So now we're going to look at the object description for that homecoming pamphlet. Not every metadata record, again, uses all the 15 elements, but this one does. So you've got your title, the homecoming pamphlet, and then we've got the subject, which is Lombard College, Galesburg, Illinois, miscellaneous papers, and then papers as another subject. Notice the searchable date string is really long. That's an IDA thing, because you can't just do like a range. You have to do each decade, which is super fun to do when you're creating metadata templates in Content DM. Sorry, I am very sarcastic today. I will try to stop that. Okay, here is another image. So this is from the Chicago Botanic Gardens collection. And again, this is on IDA, and they own a multi-volume set of books written by Friedrich Wilhelm Ludwig Kronzlin. This is manuscript 11, which was the final volume of the collection. And this image is on page 7. These books feature orchid diagnoses, letters, original botanical sketches, chromolithograph botanical prints, off-prints of journal articles, and leaves of printed text dated between 1880 and 1908. And on the left is the page of the book, while on the right you can see the object description using Dublin Core elements. And so this was, actually hand drawn in pencil by Kranzlin. And these were some really cool manuscripts too. I didn't touch the real ones, but I looked at all of the digitized pages, and they were really cool. So check those out on the IDA website if you want to see more. So we also did Dr. Preston Bradley's sermons. So this item description is for one of his radio broadcasts. I believe this was the first one, or at least the first one that they had, and it's from March 10th, 1939. If you do go listen to it later, the sound quality is, I think, pretty decent for being that old. Again, this collection is owned by Meadville-Lombard Theological School. And Dr. Bradley was a minister of People's Church, Chicago, Illinois. And there were radio broadcasts and sermons which ranged from 1939 to the 1980s. And at the top of the page is the audio file, and you can tell that this one is 30 minutes, 33 seconds long, and you can just click on the play button and listen to it. The item description is shown as well. I didn't put the full transcript because just for display purposes, because it was really long, and this was enough text for one slide. But the title is Sermons from the People's Church, 1939 to 1985. And then this was entitled number 2, Dr. Bradley B. Many of these were on cassettes. I'm assuming this one was probably more on a reel-to-reel, just because it was from 39. But his later ones in the 70s and 80s were transcribed from audio cassettes and then digitized. Okay, so this is also part of the Meadville-Lombard Theological Schools collection, and this is the Jenkin Lloyd-Jones collection, which included personal and professional correspondence with many of the documents relating to the World Parliament of Religions, which was held in conjunction with the World's Columbian Exposition, which took place in Chicago, Illinois in 1893. And this also can be found in the IDA collection. On the left is the typewritten letter, and on the right is the transcription of the letter. And I realize the letter on the left is typewritten, but it's also kind of hard to read. And by providing the transcripts, then this letter is searchable on IDA. So I'm just going to read it because it made me laugh because I have a weird sense of humor. So I did this transcription. So I am a very literal transcriptionist. So the number 008 World Congress, that was the name of this book. And then there was, somebody wrote that little 0 dash, so I included that at the top. So Jacob Lloyd Jones wrote this on November 20th, 1902, and it was addressed to Mr. L.P. Nelson. So he put, "Dear Sir, I'm interested in your article, but it is scarcely the thing that we have in mind in our Sunday night meetings. And as each pastor from his own program, I should have no power in selecting. Personally, while I think your scheme is an attractive one, I doubt if it will ever come in that way. The old world organizes itself very slowly. A very few of the great powers will begin by establishing an understanding, and slowly it will spread. There is little hope that Christendom will put itself on a peace basis with the pagan world until it establishes such a basis between its own dismembered and antagonistic constituents. I thank you for letting me see the article. Very respectfully yours, Jacob Lloyd Jones." And it just, I mean, it's sad and funny because I feel like the world has changed a lot between 1902 and now. But he just had a very distinctive way of writing. I read many and transcribed many of his letters. This was actually one of his shorter ones, but they are all very interesting to read, and it's kind of fun to kind of get to know somebody just through their letter writing. But I felt like I did get to know him a little bit. Okay. So here is the object description of the letter that we just saw on the previous slide. And again, all 15 of the simple Dublin Core elements are used. So we've got the title and the subject. So we've got the World's Columbian Exposition, 1893, Chicago Ill, and then the World's Parliament of Religions, 1893, Chicago Ill, and World's Congress of Representative Women, 1893, Chicago Ill, and then World's Columbian Exposition, 1893, Chicago Ill, because they all four took place in Chicago in 1993. And then the IDA subjects are religion and papers. All right. So some of our more recent metadata projects have been the Marshall Public Library Oral History Collection. So this is Bill Mealing's oral history object description. He provided the picture, so I'm not sure which one he is. He could be the guy in the middle or the one on the right. So the Friends of Marshall Public Library interviewed residents of Marshall, Illinois, who shared their personal stories of growing up and living in Marshall. Bill's interview took place on November 13th, 2003, and Bill's wife, Kathleen, interviewed him. If you look under the contributors in the Dublin Core record, you will see her name there. In Content DM, these interviews have 4 pages. So the first page has an image, if provided, as well as the item and object description. On page 2 is the audio recording of the interview and an object and item description. On the third page is the full transcript. You have to click on the transcript to read all the pages, and an object and item description. And then the fourth page has a digital file, which is a downloadable file of the transcript, as well as an object and item description. At the top right of this slide is the playable audio file, which can be found on the IDA website. But notice that this audio file was cataloged separately from the object description, unlike the Dr. Preston Bradley radio broadcast that we looked at a few minutes ago. And notice that the Friends of Marshall Public Library are the creators for this one. Okay. So these next 2 slides are actually a sneak peek of the upcoming Marshall Public Library Digital Archive Collection, which is currently being uploaded to IDA, and it should be available for viewing soon, or might be right now. Wayne Plattfelder started selling American Motors cars, including Hudson and Nash, at this location in the 1940s. This picture shows Wayne Plattfelder presenting the keys to a Nash Rambler to car winner, Mrs. Claude McDaniel. This was possibly in 1956 when a nationwide contest was announced by the Plattfelders. This building, as well as the buildings to the north and south to the alley on 5th Street, was torn down in the late 1970s to make room for the new Delaney Bank. But again, you know, 1956, I feel like this is a pretty clear digital image of the photo. Okay, again, this is another sneak peek. So this is North 6th Street Garage softball team. So they played in the National League in Marshall in the 1830s. The National League and the American League each had 6 teams in 1938. According to an article in the September 1, 1838 Clark County Democrat, they played at Griffith Field located near the light plant. So players for the team included M. Frazier, catcher, Ditto, center field, Haley, right field, and Euler, pitcher. They were called the Pontiacs. And this picture may be of other players or another year, as their jerseys say John Deere, and one of the players looked like Don McNary, who played for the high school juniors in, it says 1938, but I think that might be 1838. Let me check the dates on that later. Sorry, guys. So the owners of the North 6th Street Garage, established in 1934, were Robert Flowers and Ernest Kyle. They may be in front of the picture. They moved their business to 615 Archer Ave in 1941. And the building that housed the garage has a long history, beginning with a barber shop in that location. The current building was erected in 1907 by D.D. Dahl, and a new front was added in 1948 with 3 large display windows. Automobile sales in the building, starting in 1915, had many owners through the years, in addition to Flowers and Kyle, including Judge A.L. Ruffner, George Bueller, Nathan Jones, Reginald Coyle, Woodford Burnett, Rex King, Harold Hickson, Leon Fitzgerald, Don Stanfield, John Forsyth, and Jerry Forsyth. Granny's Attic was there in 2005, and First Step Academy in 2015. It is now the home of Julie Davidson's Fried Green Tomatoes Antique Shop. So this project is basically historical photos, and there's a woman in the community who had all of these images on different thumb drives, and she had all of the knowledge in her brain about these pictures, so she started sharing that information with the librarians at Marshall Public Library. So if you think the description sounds a little wonky, that's why. But they were also very interested in the historical history of these buildings. So, okay. So we've been talking about the Dublin Core generator. So let's look at some examples. So you can create a Dublin Core record with the Dublin Core generator. And I've got that link, and it'll be in the slides on L2 as well. So I use the Dublin Core generator to create the Dublin Core data elements on slides 15 and 16 of this presentation. The DCG has a box for each of the 15 elements, which you populate with the information that you have. And let's look at those boxes right now. So if you can see, the first 2 columns are the 15 elements. And then the far right column is where you select your output options and click Generate Metadata, which is the top box. And then the output box is where the data will appear. So let's see what happens when you actually do that. Okay, so I found this image and the metadata record in the Library of Congress Digital Archives collection. And we're going to use this information to create a metadata record using the Dublin Core generator. So the title of this photo is Calvin Coolidge Greets Wounded Man. All right, so we've got our title, which is Calvin Coolidge Greets Wounded Man. Our subject is United States, and then Coolidge, Calvin, 1872 to 1933 photographs. And the description is, this is an image of President Calvin Coolidge shaking the hand of a man in a wheelchair. The publisher is Harrison Ewing, and then the contributor is also Harrison Ewing, photographer. And the date is 1927. The type is still image and glass negative, so you can add more or subtract if you, depending on how many types, well, really in all these elements, you can add and subtract. And then the format is photograph. Identifier is LCDIG HEC 34492. That was their Library of Congress number. The source is the Harrison Ewing photograph collection. Language is English. The relation is Harrison Ewing photograph collection. And the rights, you can't read all of it there, but there's no known restrictions on publication. But so I copied and pasted all this information into the Dublin Core generator. Then I clicked on that generate metadata. And let's look and see what the record looks like. So here's the output Dublin Core record. Again, if you don't like your results, you can always go back and edit the information, or you can select different options in the output options box. Nick Stuffel is the person who created the Dublin Core generator 10 years ago. And I emailed him and asked him a little bit more about it, because there was supposed to be a way that you could save this to a file, which didn't work for me. And he told me it's mostly used as a demonstration tool, mostly by like LAS instructors. And this is a quote from him: "I can't imagine using it to generate records, and copy pasting them into some other system would be a particularly pleasant or efficient way to use it. The code is available under GPL though, so I suppose someone with the right skills could come up with something. When I created it 10 years ago, I'd hoped someone from OCLC would be dazzled by it and would find a life integrated into connection or some other, and I hope someone, find a life integrated into connection or some other cataloging metadata tool set, plus maybe come with a job, question mark. I had a few pleasant chats with people at conferences about it, but nothing ever really materialized. And I asked his permission to share that because I just thought that was a really cool story, because I feel like this could have had a really robust life if some, larger entity would have taken ownership. But it's still a cool way to demonstrate what a record would look like in Dublin Core format. So you can play along and create your own Dublin Core records for fun too. So these are the resources that I used. You can find out more information about Content DM, more about the Dublin Core itself, the generator, the Metadata Initiative, the Illinois Digital Archives, and then of course the Library of Congress Digital Archives, which you can spend hours looking at pictures. I don't know who would do that. Okay, it's time for questions. And the CMC staff who are on the call include Barbara Scobie, she goes by Barb, me, Mary Cornell, and Eric McKinney. So if you have any questions, please feel free to share them. And if there are questions in the chat, then Mary is going to read them and I will try to answer them.
Okay, so our first question came up when you had the Calvin Coolidge slide up with the...
Mary, is your mic right by your mouth? It's really hard to hear you.
I put it up. Anyways,
there you go.
So yep. Our first question was came up with a Calvin Coolidge record, and it asked, would creator be unknown or the contributor?
I chose the photographer, but I mean that's totally up to you. And if you've got a digitized collection or any collection that you're going to use Dublin Core with, you can certainly make up your own rules. I made up my own rule and decided the photographer shirt. I know there's also discussion about so like whoever digitized the photo should maybe have like contributor or creator rights, but I think that's so sorry. Kind of stretching things. Oh wow, bad. Okay. Okay, hopefully he stopped barking. So yeah, so you can basically go down a rabbit hole with that. But I would say if you're going to start any of these projects, try to come up with your own guidelines, as well as, using best practices that other people have already established. You don't have to create the wheel, right? But just try to think big picture about what your collection is all about and what works best for you and your library or institution. So they asked, so it's best to leave blank. I just was wondering because in the rights it says no known. Okay, let me go back to that slide. Sorry. So rights, there's just no known restrictions on publication, because sometimes in the rights, like only, like if, especially if like you're an academic library, like only, you know, like students or employees at the university can have access to it. So that's all that means. And you can certainly leave any of those elements blank. Again, it's really kind of up to you and your institution on what you want to include and how you want to include things. And I possibly didn't need to put like Harrison Ewing so many times in there, but I felt like they were the photographers, so they should be in there, but I probably could have left them out of some of the areas. And if you leave those blank when you use a generator, then it just doesn't include them. So, okay. Probably just was rambling on too long, sorry. And yes, the recording will be on our webpage later. Okay.
All right, do we have any other questions? Okay, so Edie asks, when creating Dublin Core records for IDA, are you using Content DM?
Yes, and we're actually using the Illinois State Library's Content DM. So that's why I said I wasn't sure if that collection was up yet, because they're the ones that have to make it visible. We don't have as much control over those sorts of things. So if we worked at, you know, a real library, I don't want to say real, that's me. So like if I worked at a library, right, I would have my own version of Content DM, and then I could decide when to hide and show basically my collections. But we have to ask a staff member at this Illinois State Library to make it visible. It's like, it's ready now, which is nice too, though, because sometimes you really need to look over your collection and make sure that everything is displaying the way you want it to. And also that's when you find little things that you need to edit. Or maybe that's just me. I always find things that I want to edit. Like, oh, I should have done that. So yeah, so yep, we use Illinois State Library's Content DM.
Okay, we have another question here. Is there a minimum suggestion of how many elements to be used? For example, must have at least 3, etc.
Not really. I mean, so the simple Dublin Core, those, I mean, it's core for a reason, right? So they're basically suggesting that you use those 15 elements. But as you could see, especially from some of the Library of Congress, items, they didn't end. It's sometimes it's the specific item, because yeah, you can't just like make up things. Well, I mean, you could, but that wouldn't be, you wouldn't be a good catalog then. Like you can only use what you have, right? You can't just make up some fun elements to add. So yeah, you just kind of have to work with what you have, you know, because sometimes, you know, if it's just a photo, sometimes there just really isn't a lot of information. I mean, there isn't really a lot of information for this one either. You know, Calvin Coolidge greets the wounded man. I mean, so I actually added the Coolidge Calvin subject heading, because on Library of Congress website, all they had was the United States. And I'm like, that's not really, I feel like you know, and I could probably have added more, but I was trying to finish this presentation. So I was like, okay, we need to get this done. But you know, I think having, you know, the type that it's a still image and that it's glass negative and that it's a photograph as the format and that the date was 1927, you know, like those bits of information are important as well. Oh, and you can probably see my, no, I didn't flip the, okay. Let me go back.
I have one more question.
Okay.
So this is from Erica at RSA.
Mhm.
This was a great presentation with the fundamentals. I was wondering best practices for how the elements are entered. This seems very open-ended, so local consistency would be so important. And she apologizes if you already covered this.
Again, I think that's kind of going back to what you want to do for your institution. I know the Illinois State Library has their best practices. I probably should have added that as a resource, and I will look that up and send that out to you. But you know, if your library or consortium or whatever is deciding on starting something like this, I think you need to just really kind of think about, you know, what works best for your collection and what items you have, but also, you know, use forward thinking, because just what you have right now isn't what you're always going to have. So don't like box yourself into anything either. And I think there was another question, is the Dublin Core generator available by subscription? It's just totally free, Kat. Yeah, and I've got the link under my resource. That's actually kind of fun to play around with, but perhaps not always the best use of time. I don't know. And I didn't need to use that when I was creating the metadata templates in IDA, because you're using the templates. And so for us, we have to work with staff from the state library to decide what elements we're going to use for each collection. And those can be modified, customized, whatever. And then you kind of go from there. And then whatever you've decided, then those are in your template. And then you fill out all those elements for each one.
Okay. Do we have any more questions?
Lori just commented, right. So if you only had scan info, no minimum. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And
I mean,
then,
try to, you know, include as much information as you can about each item, just, you know, just like you would with a book.
mhm. And then Erica just says, that makes sense. It is up to you. Thanks for following up with IDA best practices.
I will. Again, I'm sorry, I should have included that in my resource page or slide. And I promise you guys will not have to hear me until next fall. I will not do any more online with the CMCs this fiscal year.
Okay. It looks like we don't have any more questions as of right now.
All right, so I'm going to do a total plug. So we are looking for a metadata cataloger. The job ad is up on our webpage. It's also on the Carly job board. So if anybody is interested in working with these collections, we've got a couple that will be new ones that we're going to be starting hopefully next month if we have somebody in place. If not, then they'll start a little bit later. And I never used to be like a history nerd, I didn't think. But when I started out as a metadata cataloger, and working with some of these historical collections was just really cool. So if you've got any interest, just hop on our website. Yep, thanks, Mary. She put the link there. Oh, yep, I can just show that one. Sorry, this reminder to self, when your slides have white on the bottom, it's really hard to find the arrow button. There's the resource page. And again, the slides are already on L2. And then I'll put the slides with the notes soon after this is over. You are welcome, Lori. Oh, okay. Connie says she didn't know it existed. Yeah, I didn't really know too much about it either before I started here. So I think it's a pretty cool framework to describe, especially digital items. Oh, I talked really long, didn't I? Sorry. You are welcome, Sarah. Sorry, Mary.
Oh, no, you're good. Nope, I was just going to say we have a bunch of thank yous coming in, so it's so helpful.
Okay, and our next presentation will be February 17th, I think. Okay, you're welcome, guys.
February 17th, talking about the 024, 028, 588 fields for CDs and DVDs.
And yes, one of our newer catalogers, Eric McKinney, is going to present that. So,
yay.
Yep. You guys can all put a plug in and coming to work with us. And you know, it's any of the 3 hubs, Champaign, Edwardsville, or Carbondale. There's office space at all 3 places.
Okay. And if that is it, I think we will go ahead and wrap up.
Okay, sorry I talk so long.
Oh, you're good.
Oh, no, good presentation, Pam. Thanks.
Thanks. All right, thanks, guys. Hope to see you next month.
Bye, all.